The early morning mist hung thick over the barren fields of Nyamelo, a small rural village tucked away from the bustling towns. Life here was harsh and relentless, and few knew this better than the brothers Sam and James. Orphaned at a young age, they had grown up learning to survive by any means necessary. While most people in Nyamelo endured hard times, Sam and James bore the brunt of it, living hand to mouth, often going days without a proper meal. Sam, the younger of the two at 27, was slender but wiry, with a stubborn streak that sometimes got him into trouble. James, older by 2 years, was more measured and thoughtful, often playing the role of protector and guide. They were bound by hardship but also by a fierce love for each other. With no family to fall back on, they had grown closer than most siblings, each becoming the other's anchor in a world that seemed to forget them. One evening, as the brothers sat by the small fire they'd managed to light outside their tiny, crumbling hut, James broke the silence. "Sam, we can't keep living like this. Every day, it's the same fight. I'm tired of scraping by, of having nothing to show for all our hard work," James said, his voice filled with frustration. Sam nodded solemnly. He felt the same despair, a quiet yet relentless feeling that gnawed at him. "But what can we do? We've tried everything, James. We don't have land, we don't have any money, and everyone here is just as poor as us." "There might be another way," James said, his voice low, almost a whisper. Sam looked at him, puzzled. "What do you mean?" "I heard about a man, a ritualist, who lives far from here, deep in the mountains," James explained cautiously. "They say he can give people what they want, for a price." Sam felt a chill run down his spine. He'd heard whispers about people who sought the help of ritualists, men who dealt in dark magic and strange rituals. Some returned wealthy beyond their wildest dreams, while others were never seen again. It was a path marked by fear and mystery, but also by the possibility of escape from the life they despised. "Are you serious, James?" Sam asked, his voice barely audible. James nodded slowly. "Do we have any other choice?" The brothers decided to leave at dawn. They had little to carry with them, just a small sack with some dried cassava and a few strips of meat. The journey was long and arduous, taking them through dense forests, over rocky hills, and across treacherous rivers. At night, they camped under the stars, sharing whispered hopes and fears about what lay ahead. After 2 days of traveling, they reached the edge of the mountains where the ritualist was said to live. The air here was thick with an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional cry of a night bird or the rustle of leaves in the wind. As they climbed higher, Sam began to feel a strange sensation, as though the very air was charged with energy. Finally, they arrived at a small clearing where a modest hut stood, built from old, weathered wood. Outside, a fire crackled, casting flickering shadows over the ground. A man sat by the fire, his face obscured by a hood, but his piercing eyes glinted in the firelight. He looked up as they approached, as though he had been expecting them. "Welcome," the man said in a voice that was calm yet unsettling. "I am Elijah, the keeper of secrets and the weaver of fate. Tell me, why have you come?" James took a deep breath and stepped forward. "We have come to change our lives. We are tired of being poor, of having nothing. We want a better life, no matter what it takes." Elijah studied them both carefully, his gaze lingering on each of them as though he could see into their souls. "What you seek is not a simple thing, and the path you choose comes with a heavy price. Are you prepared for the cost?" The brothers exchanged a glance. They had come this far, there was no turning back now. "We are prepared," Sam said, his voice steady. Elijah nodded. "Very well. I can grant you the wealth and success you desire, but it will require a ritual, a test of faith and loyalty. Only one of you can achieve this success, while the other must bear a burden as great as your wealth. What kind of burden? James asked, a note of fear creeping into his voice. Elijah's eyes darkened. Whoever finds the hidden box I will send you to seek shall be the one to receive the fortune. But beware, the other will lose his sanity. The successful brother must then take his mad brother to a far place, away from his new life. Should the mad one ever find his way back, the successful one will die. The brothers were silent, the weight of Elijah's words settling heavily over them. This was no ordinary bargain. It was a pact that would forever bind their fates, drawing them together even as it tore them apart. Elijah led them into the heart of the forest, deeper than either of them had ever ventured. They walked in silence, each brother lost in his thoughts. Finally, they arrived at a circle of stones, each inscribed with strange symbols that glowed faintly in the darkness. "Stand here," Elijah instructed, positioning each of them at opposite ends of the circle. He began to chant in a language they didn't understand, his voice rising and falling like the wind. Sam felt a strange sensation in his chest, as though his heart was being pulled in two directions at once. He looked over at James, who was staring straight ahead, his jaw clenched, his eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. The chanting grew louder, and the ground beneath their feet seemed to pulse with energy. Elijah reached into his robes and pulled out a small wooden box, placing it in the center of the circle. "Within this forest lies another box, identical to this one. Only one of you will find it, and that one will receive all that you desire. Remember the rule, the other will bear a great burden. This is the pact you have made, and there is no turning back." With a final chant, Elijah stepped back, leaving the brothers alone in the circle. As the first light of dawn began to break, Elijah nodded to them both, signaling that the ritual had begun. The brothers exchanged a final look, a silent farewell, knowing that only one of them would emerge from this as they had always dreamed. They set off in opposite directions, each searching the dense forest for the hidden box. The hours dragged on, and Sam felt his heart pounding as he moved through the undergrowth, eyes scanning every rock, every tree, every shadow. The thought of leaving James behind, of condemning him to a life of madness, weighed heavily on his mind, but he pushed it aside, focusing on the promise of a better life. Finally, as the sun began to dip low in the sky, Sam stumbled upon a small clearing. There, half hidden beneath a pile of stones, he saw it, a box identical to the one Elijah had shown them. His heart raced as he reached down and lifted it, feeling the weight of the wood in his hands. This was it. He had found the box. At that moment, a strange sensation washed over him, a mixture of triumph and dread. He had succeeded, but at what cost? His thoughts drifted to James, to the fate that now awaited him. When Sam returned to the ritualist's hut with the box in hand, Elijah was waiting for him, his face expressionless. "It is done," Elijah said quietly. "You have won the fortune you desired. But remember the pact. You must take your brother to a far place, far from the life you will now lead. If he ever finds you, your life will end." Sam nodded, feeling a heavy sadness settle over him. He returned to the forest where he had last seen James, and there he found his brother, sitting in the shadows, his eyes wide and unfocused, his face a mask of confusion and fear. With tears in his eyes, Sam led his brother away, fulfilling the final part of the ritual. He took James far from Niamelo, to a place where he hoped his brother would find peace. It was the hardest thing he had ever done, and as he walked away, he felt a part of himself break. The wealth he had sought was now his, but it came at a price he would carry for the rest of his life. It had been months since Sam had walked away from the village, carrying nothing but the wooden box that sealed his fate and his brother James's tragic destiny. Now, Sam lived a life of unimaginable wealth, far removed from the poverty-stricken days in Niamelo. He had moved into an affluent neighborhood, surrounded by sprawling estates, manicured gardens, and private guards. He drove luxury cars and dined at the finest restaurants. Every need, every desire, was met with a simple nod or command. But, amidst all this grandeur, a hollow feeling lingered, a feeling of guilt, of a price paid too dearly. In his dreams, Sam still saw James. His brother's haunted eyes appeared to him in flashes, fragmented memories woven with fear and regret. The look on James's face when he realized his fate, the weight of his madness, haunted Sam with a frequency that grew by the day. It was as though James's presence reached across the miles, reminding him of the sacrifice he had made. Sam's wealth opened doors he'd never imagined. He was invited to high-profile events and met influential people. But he found himself distant, unable to connect. Every face he saw reminded him of the pact he had made, of the blood tie he had severed for the sake of fortune. He had money, but it brought no peace, only a dull ache that lingered beneath the surface. At a grand party held at his mansion, Sam mingled with dignitaries, business owners, and socialites. The laughter, the music, and the glamour overwhelmed him, and he found himself standing alone on the balcony, looking out over the city lights. The opulence around him felt like a gilded prison, trapping him within a fate he could not escape. It was here, in moments of solitude, that he felt James's presence most strongly. The silence seemed to carry his brother's voice, a faint whisper that echoed in his mind, reminding him of the day they had parted. As time passed, strange occurrences began to disrupt Sam's seemingly perfect life. At first, they were subtle, a cold breeze in the middle of a warm room, objects that moved inexplicably, and shadows that seemed to shift at the edge of his vision. Sam dismissed these as figments of his imagination, remnants of his guilt taking physical form. But the signs grew bolder. One night, he woke to the sound of faint, manic laughter echoing through his mansion. It was the laughter of a man unhinged, a sound that sent chills down his spine. He checked every room, every corner, yet found no one. But as he stood in his darkened hallway, he felt a presence behind him. He turned, heart pounding, but there was nothing there, only the memory of James's face, twisted with the madness that now consumed him. Sam tried to dismiss these occurrences as tricks of his mind, but they persisted. He began to hear James's voice in his waking moments, whispering his name, asking why he had been abandoned. The reminders of his brother grew in intensity, until Sam could no longer ignore them. He confided in a friend, Charles, who was one of the few people he trusted. "Sam, I think you're haunted," Charles said, half jokingly, over a drink one evening. "Maybe I am," Sam replied, his tone more serious than he intended. Charles looked at him with curiosity, sensing that there was more to Sam's story than he was letting on. But Sam couldn't tell him the truth. Who would believe the story of a pact with a ritualist, of a curse that bound him to his brother's fate? One day, as Sam was walking through the city's bustling marketplace, he saw a man standing in the crowd, watching him. The man was dressed in ragged clothes, his hair wild, his face unshaven. But it was the eyes that caught Sam's attention, the eyes that were hollow, yet intense, filled with a madness that seemed to see through him. Sam's heart raced as he realized who it was. "James," he whispered, barely able to believe it. The figure disappeared into the crowd, and Sam chased after him, pushing through the throng of people. He caught a glimpse of the man turning a corner, slipping into an alleyway. Sam followed, but when he turned the corner, there was no one there. He stood in the empty alley, panting, his heart pounding in his chest. It couldn't have been James. He had taken his brother far away, to a place where he would be safe, where he couldn't find him. But the encounter left him shaken, and from that moment, he felt an invisible thread pulling him back to his brother, as though their fates were beginning to intertwine once more. The sightings grew more frequent. Sam would see James's face in reflective surfaces, his shadow appearing and vanishing in the blink of an eye. His once lavish home felt like a prison, each room haunted by the specter of his brother. The servants noticed the change in him. He grew irritable, paranoid, and would often lock himself in his room, pacing for hours on end. Sleep became a distant memory, and when he did manage to close his eyes, he was plagued by nightmares. He dreamed of running through endless forests, of searching for something he could never find, while a voice, James's voice, called out to him, filled with accusation and despair. Driven to the brink, Sam sought out Elijah, the ritualist, hoping for answers, a way to break free from this curse. "You told me he wouldn't find me," Sam shouted, his voice filled with desperation as he confronted Elijah in the darkened hut. Elijah looked at him with calm indifference. "I told you what would happen if he did find you. You were the one who underestimated fate." Sam's hands trembled. "There must be something I can do. I can't live like this, haunted, constantly looking over my shoulder." Elijah's gaze hardened. "The path you chose was bound by fate. There is no escaping it. Your brother has found his way back to you, and the pact must be fulfilled." Despair settled over Sam. He returned home, feeling as though the walls were closing in on him. The wealth and luxury that had once felt like a blessing now felt like a curse, chaining him to a life he could no longer enjoy. He found himself envying those who lived simple, ordinary lives, free from the haunting weight of their past. One evening, as he sat alone in his grand, silent dining hall, he heard footsteps echoing through the corridor. The footsteps were uneven, shuffling, the steps of someone who had wandered far and grown weary. Sam froze, his heart racing as the footsteps drew closer. And then, there he was, James, standing in the doorway, his clothes ragged, his eyes wild with the madness that had consumed him. "Brother," James's voice was low, barely a whisper, but it cut through the silence like a blade. Sam felt a surge of fear and guilt. He had thought he could escape, that the distance and his new life would shield him from the pact they had made. But James had found him, just as Elijah had warned. "I had to find you," James said, taking a step forward. You left me. I was alone, lost." Sam backed away, his mind racing as he remembered Elijah's words, if the mad brother found him, his life would be forfeit. "James, you don't understand," Sam stammered, his voice trembling. "I had no choice. It was the only way." James's face twisted in pain and anger. "You chose this life over me. You left me to suffer." Realizing that he had only one option, Sam turned and ran, fleeing through the corridors of his mansion. Behind him, he heard James's footsteps, relentless, echoing through the halls like a dark melody. He raced through the front doors, into the night, desperate to escape the fate he had brought upon himself. He drove through the city, his hands gripping the wheel tightly, his heart pounding. But as he sped down the empty road, he felt a strange sense of inevitability. There was no escaping this. He had made a choice, and now he had to face the consequences. In the rearview mirror, he saw a shadowy figure standing in the middle of the road, watching him. It was James, his face illuminated by the headlights, his eyes filled with a haunting mix of sorrow and vengeance. Sam closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his guilt settle over him like a shroud. He knew, in that moment, that he could not outrun fate. The pact he had made, the bond he had severed, would claim him in the end. And with a final, resigned breath, Sam's journey came to an end as the darkness closed in around him.